keeping the Ember Throne spotless. The dust had finally claimed victory. It covered every surface of the Grand Hall, turning gold into gray and crimson into rust. King Valdris lay on the cold marble floor beside his throne, too weak to climb the steps anymore. His wings, once capable of blocking out the sun, draped lifelessly across the stones like torn curtains. He tried to remember the last time someone had spoken to him. Was it weeks ago? Months? The silence had become so normal that he barely noticed it anymore. His attendants had left first, taking the ceremonial robes and claiming they needed to seek help. They never returned. His advisors followed soon after, their arms full of treasury documents and precious artifacts. His own children came last, standing at the doorway of the throne room, with expressions mixing pity and disgust. "You are no longer strong," his eldest daughter had said. "The sickness has made you weak. We cannot be seen with weakness." Valdris had not argued. Among his kind, strength determined everything. A weak king was no king at all. He had ruled 17 star systems through force and fire. Now he could barely lift his head. The plague had come from nowhere, targeting only his species. It dulled their flames, weakened their wings, and slowly drained their life force. Most dragons who caught it died within months. Valdris had survived for 3 years. But survival meant nothing when you were alone. He closed his eyes and let his mind drift backward, searching for better memories. They came in fragments. Battles won, treaties signed, planets brought under his protection. But those memories felt hollow now, like reading about someone else's life. His mind kept returning to a different memory, one he had almost forgotten until recently. 20 years ago, the palace had been full of life. Servants rushed through the corridors. Advisors debated in the council chambers. Valdris had walked these same halls with purpose and power. One morning, he had heard crying echoing through the West Wing. Following the sound, he found a small human child sitting against a wall, tears streaming down his face. The boy could not have been more than 7 years old. He wore simple clothes, too big for his small frame. When he saw Valdris approaching, his eyes went wide with terror. Dragons were known across the galaxy. Most species feared them. "Please do not eat me," the child had whispered. Valdris had felt something strange in that moment. Amusement, perhaps, or maybe something gentler. "I do not eat children," he had said, lowering himself to appear less threatening. "Why are you crying?" "I am lost. My father works here. He cleans the floors. I came with him because school was closed. I try to find a bathroom, and now I do not know where I am." Valdris had helped the boy stand. "What is your name?" "Henry." "Well, Henry, I am King Valdris. I know these halls very well. I will help you find your father." They had walked together through the palace. Henry stopped crying and started asking questions. Why were the ceilings so high? What were the paintings about? Could dragons really breathe fire? Valdris answered each question patiently. When they found Henry's father, a nervous man named Robert who worked in the janitorial staff, the human had apologized over and over. "It is nothing," Valdris had said. The boy was curious. Curiosity should be encouraged, not punished. Before Henry left, Valdris had given him something. A small scale from his own wing, no bigger than a coin. It shimmered with inner light. "Keep this," Valdris had said, "so you remember that even kings can take time to help lost children." Henry had clutched the scale like it was made of diamonds. "Thank you, Your Majesty." That memory felt more real than any battle or conquest. Valdris opened his eyes and stared at the dusty ceiling. He wondered what had happened to that child. Probably grew up and forgot all about the Dragon King who helped him once. Humans lived such short lives. 20 years was a long time for them. Pain flared through his chest. Valdris coughed, and weak flames flickered from his mouth, barely warming the air. The sickness was getting worse. He could feel it in his bones, in his blood. Soon, very soon, it would take him completely. He had accepted this. Death came for everyone eventually, even dragon kings who had ruled for thousands of years. He tried to stand one more time. His legs trembled but held his weight. He managed 3 steps toward the throne before collapsing again. The marble was cold against his scales. He could hear wind blowing through broken windows somewhere in the palace. The sound was lonely, like the palace itself was mourning. Valdris closed his eyes again. Sleep came easier these days. He dreamed of flying, of feeling the wind beneath his wings, of breathing fire that could melt steel. He dreamed of the palace full of voices and life. He dreamed of a small human boy with curious eyes, asking questions about paintings and ceilings. When he woke, he would still be alone. The dust would still cover everything. The silence would still press down like a weight. But for now, in his dreams, he was strong again. In his dreams, he was not dying alone in an empty palace on a forgotten world. In his dreams, someone still cared. The cargo bay smelled like burnt fuel and old metal. Henry checked the manifest for the third time, making sure every container was properly sealed. His ship, the Wanderer, was not fancy or fast, but it got the job done. He had been hauling freight across the outer systems for 12 years now, ever since he turned 18. The work was honest and paid enough to live on. "You hear about Ashmar?" his docking supervisor asked, scanning the cargo containers. Henry looked up from his datapad. "What about it?" "Dragon World. Quarantined 5 years ago. Apparently their king is dying. Some plague wiped out most of their population." The supervisor shook his head. "Nobody goes near that planet anymore. Bad luck, they say." Henry felt something twist in his chest. "The king is dying?" "Yeah, dying alone, from what I heard. His own kind abandoned him. Not even his family stayed." The supervisor finished his scan. "You are cleared for departure. Safe travels." Henry barely heard him. He walked back to his ship in a daze, his mind racing. That evening, while the Wanderer was docked at the station, he sat in his quarters and pulled out a small wooden box. Inside was a crystal scale, worn smooth from years of handling. It still shimmered with faint light, even after all this time that he remembered that day so clearly, being lost in the massive palace. The fear when he saw the huge dragon approaching. The gentle voice that calmed him down. The walk through beautiful corridors, with the king himself answering his silly questions. His father had been so worried, but the king had been kind. He had given Henry this scale and told him to remember that kindness mattered, even for kings. Henry held the scale up to the light. 20 years ago, King Valdris had taken time from ruling 17 star systems to help a scared child find his father. Now, that same king was dying alone. The decision came easily. Henry pulled up the navigation charts and plotted a course to Ashmar. It would take 3 days of travel, and he would have to break his current contract. The company would fine him. Other haulers would call him crazy. The planet was quarantined for good reason. None of that mattered. 3 days later, the Wanderer dropped out of hyperspace near Ashmar. Warning beacons immediately lit up his communication panel. Automated messages played on repeat, telling him the planet was restricted. He ignored them and descended through the atmosphere. The world below looked sick. Brown clouds covered most of the surface. Cities that once gleamed were dark and empty. Henry guided his ship toward the coordinates he had found in old registry files. The royal palace sat on a hill overlooking what used to be the capital city. He landed in an overgrown courtyard. Vines covered the landing pads. Trees had broken through the stone pathways. Henry grabbed a medical kit from his ship and walked toward the main entrance. The massive doors hung open, one completely off its hinges. Inside, everything was falling apart. Tapestries rotted on the walls. Furniture lay broken and scattered. Henry followed the main corridor, his footsteps echoing in the empty halls. He remembered this place being full of light and voices. Now it was attuned. He found a throne room at the end of the grand hallway. The doors were open wide. Inside, dust covered everything like snow. And there, lying on the floor beside the throne, was King Valdris. Henry's breath caught. The dragon was huge, even lying down, but he looked nothing like the powerful king from Henry's memory. His scales were dull and cracked. His wings were torn in places. His breathing was shallow and labored. Henry approached slowly. "Your Majesty?" The dragon's eyes opened, unfocused at first. They were still golden, but the light in them was fading. Valdris tried to lift his head and failed. "Who?" The voice was weak, barely a whisper. Who dares enter? It is me, your majesty. Henry, Robert. You helped me when I was lost a long time ago. The dragon's eyes try to focus. I do not. Remember, Henry knelt down and pulled out the crystal scale. He held it where Valdris could see it. You gave me this. You told me to remember that even kings can take time to help lost children. Something changed in those golden eyes. Recognition, perhaps. Or maybe just confusion. The boy, Valdris whispered. You were so small. I grew up. Henry set down his medical kit and opened it. I heard you were sick. I came to help. Valdris coughed weakly. You should leave. The sickness, it might spread to you. Humans have good immune systems. We will be fine. Henry pulled out a scanner and started checking the dragon's vital signs. They were bad, but not as bad as he feared. When did you last eat? I do not remember. When did you last drink water? Valdris did not answer. Henry stood up and looked around the throne room. He spotted a fountain in the corner, dry and covered in dust. I will be right back. He ran back to his ship and grabbed every water container he had. When he returned, he carefully helped Valdris drink. The dragon was too weak to protest. After several minutes, some color returned to his scales. Why did you come? Valdris asked. I'm nothing now. No power. No kingdom. Just a dying creature in an empty palace. Henry sat down beside the dragon's massive head. You came to help me when I was scared and alone. I came to help you for the same reason. That was different. You were a child, and you were a king who could have ignored me. But you did not. Henry pulled out more supplies from his kit. I am staying until you get better. Or, he paused, or until the end. Either way, you will not be alone. For the first time in years, something other than pain crossed Valdris's face. It might have been gratitude. It might have been disbelief. Or perhaps it was simply the surprise of discovering that kindness, once given, sometimes returns when you need it most. Henry set up his camp in the corner of the throne room. He brought in sleeping gear, food supplies, and medical equipment from a wanderer. Valdris watched him work with confused eyes, still too weak to do much more than breathe and occasionally sip water. You are wasting your time, the dragon said for the fourth time that day. Probably, Henry agreed, unpacking antibiotics and pain medication. But it is my time to waste. He ran a full medical scan on Valdris. The results were concerning, but not hopeless. The plague had damaged the dragon's respiratory system and weakened his muscle tissue. Severe malnutrition made everything worse. But the plague itself seemed to be in a dormant phase, no longer actively spreading. Your body is fighting it, Henry explained, reading the data. You just need support. Food, water, medicine, rest. My kind already tried everything. There is no cure. Maybe not a cure, but we can treat the symptoms. Make you stronger. Henry loaded a dose of pain medication into an injector designed for large species. This will help with the chest pain. Valdris flinched when the needle went in, but moments later his breathing eased. His eyes widened slightly. The pain, it is less. Human medicine. We might be weak, but we are very good at making things that fix bodies. Henry smiled. Now about food. What do dragons eat? Meat. Fresh meat. Henry thought for a moment. I have some preserved protein in my ship. It is not fresh, but it has nutrients. Let me get it. Over the next few hours, Henry managed to get Valdris to eat small amounts. The dragon's stomach had shrunk from years of barely eating. Too much food at once would make things worse. Slow and steady was better. As night fell, Henry cleaned the area around the throne. He swept away dust, moved broken furniture, and even managed to get one of the fountains working again. The sound of running water filled the silent hall. Valdris watched all of this with an expression Henry could not quite read. Why are you doing this? The dragon asked quietly. Henry paused in his sweeping. I told you. You helped me once. That was nothing. A small kindness. I walked you through a palace and gave you a trinket. It was everything to me. Henry sat down on the throne room steps. I was terrified that day. I thought I would be lost forever. I thought my father would lose his job because of me. Then this huge dragon, this king of 17 star systems, stopped everything to help a random human child. You made me feel safe. You made me feel like I mattered. Valdris was quiet for a long moment. I had forgotten about that day. It seemed so small among thousands of years of memories. Small moments can be the most important ones. Henry stood up and went back to cleaning. Besides, I learned something important from you that day. What did you learn? That power and kindness can exist together. That being strong does not mean being cruel. Henry dumped a pile of dust outside the throne room doors. A lot of species think humans are weak because we care about things, because we help others even when there is no benefit to us. But I think that caring is what makes us strong. Valdris coughed, but it was gentler than before. Your species is strange. We get that a lot. The next morning, Henry helped Valdris sit up for the first time in months. It took nearly an hour and left both of them exhausted, but the dragon managed to hold the position for several minutes before lying back down. Progress, Henry said, making notes on his datapad. Painful progress, Valdris muttered. All progress is painful. That is how you know it is real. Days passed. Henry established a routine. Wake up, check Valdris's vital signs, administer medication, help him eat, clean the palace, talk for hours, sleep, repeat. The dragon slowly grew stronger. His scales started to regain some shine. His breathing became easier. The pain in his chest lessened with each dose of medicine. They talked about everything. Valdris told stories about the old days, about battles and treaties, and the politics of running 17-star systems. Henry talked about hauling cargo, about the stations he had visited, about the other species he had met in his travels. You have lived a simple life, Valdris observed one evening. Simple is not the same as easy, Henry replied. And simple does not mean meaningless. I ruled worlds. I commanded armies. I made decisions that affected billions of lives. Valdris stared at the ceiling. Yet in the end, all of them left. My advisors stole from me. My children abandoned me. The subjects I protected forgot about me the moment I showed weakness. That is their failure, not yours. Is it? Perhaps I was a poor king. Perhaps I deserved to be alone. Henry shook his head firmly. Nobody deserves to die alone, not even bad kings. And for what you have told me, you are not a bad king. You were just born into a culture that values the wrong things. Strength is not wrong. Strength without compassion is just violence. My father used to say that. Henry checked the medical monitor beside Valdris. Your heart rate is improving. The medication is working. Valdris closed his eyes. Why do you care if I live or die? Be honest. Henry thought about how to answer. Finally, he said, because when I was 7 years old, a king took time to care about me. That changed something in me. It made me believe that the universe could be kind. Now, that king needs help, and I have the chance to show him that his kindness was not wasted. He looked at Valdris. You taught me that small acts of compassion matter. I'm just proving you were right. The dragon was silent for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough with emotion. I did not know, he said quietly. I did not know that helping one small child would someday save my life. Neither did I, Henry admitted. But that is the thing about kindness. You never know when it will come back to you. 2 weeks into Henry's stay on Ashmar, his communicator started receiving messages. The first one came from his employer, demanding to know why he had broken his contract. Henry sent a simple reply: family emergency. It was not exactly true, but it was not exactly false either. The second message came from another cargo hauler named David, someone Henry sometimes worked with on joint contracts. You crazy idiot, David's message said. Word is spreading that you are on Ashmar, with the Dragon King. People think you have lost your mind. Henry smiled and sent back, maybe I have. How did people find out? David's response came an hour later. Your ship's beacon is still active. Every station in 3 systems can track it. And someone noticed it has not moved from Ashmar in 2 weeks. They put the pieces together. Henry had not thought about the beacon. He could turn it off, but that seemed pointless now. He was not hiding. The messages multiplied after that. Other haulers sent questions. A few sent insults. Most just wanted to know if the rumors were true. Henry ignored most of them and focused on caring for Valdris. The dragon was standing now, at least for short periods. His legs still trembled with effort, but he could walk from the throne to the fountain without collapsing. His appetite had returned. Henry had to make daily trips to the Wanderer to get more food supplies. "You are running out of supplies," Valdris noted one morning. "I will figure something out. You should leave. Go back to your work. You have done enough." Henry gave him a look. "We have talked about this. I am not leaving." Stubborn human. Stubborn dragon. A new message arrived that afternoon. This one was different. It came from the Galactic Council, the governing body that oversaw relations between spacefaring species. "Attention, Henry Morrison," the message began. Henry frowned at the use of his last name. This was official. "You are ordered to evacuate Ashmar immediately. The planet is under quarantine for public health reasons. Your continued presence there violates council regulations." Henry read the message aloud to Valdris. "They are correct," the dragon said. "You should obey them." "What are they going to do? Send someone to arrest me? Nobody else wants to come here." Henry deleted the message. "Besides, I'm not breaking any real laws. The quarantine is a recommendation, not a legal order." "You checked." "I checked." 3 days later, another message arrived. This one made Henry laugh out loud. "What is it?" Valdris asked. "David sent me a supply shipment. He convinced 5 other haulers to chip in. They dropped a cargo container in orbit. It will land in the courtyard tomorrow." Henry scrolled through the manifest. Food, medicine, water purifiers, power cells. Enough for months. Valdris looked genuinely surprised. "Your friends did this?" "Humans look out for each other. Especially when one of us is doing something stupid but good." Henry grinned. "David says half the human haulers in the sector are talking about what I am doing. Some think I am an idiot. Others think I'm setting a good example." "An example of what?" "Loyalty, compassion, repaying debts." Henry shrugged. "Human things." The supply container landed the next morning exactly where David promised. Henry spent hours hauling boxes into the palace. Valdris tried to help, but was still too weak to carry much. Instead, he directed Henry to the best storage rooms, ones that were still structurally sound. Among the supplies was a message chip from David. Henry played it that evening while he and Valdris ate dinner. "Hey, Henry," David's voice said. "A bunch of us got together and talked about what you're doing. We think it is pretty amazing. So we are setting up a supply line. Every 2 weeks, someone will drop off whatever you need. Just send a list." There was a pause. "Also, you are kind of famous now. News channels picked up the story. The Dragon King dying alone, the human who came to help him. It is spreading across the networks. Lots of species are talking about it." Henry stopped the message and looked at Valdris. "Did you hear that? You are famous again. For being weak and dying. For being worth saving." Henry corrected. Over the next few days, more messages flooded in. Some were supportive. Many humans sent words of encouragement. A few other species expressed admiration. But plenty of messages were harsh. Several dragon nobles sent scathing communications, calling Valdris a disgrace for accepting help for a lesser species. They said he should have died with dignity instead of clinging to life through human charity. Henry watched Valdris read one of these messages. The dragon's expression darkened. "They are right," Valdris said quietly. "I should have died. This is shameful. This is survival." Henry shot back. "There is no shame in accepting help when you need it. You do not understand our culture. I understand that your culture left you to die alone. Forgive me if I do not respect that very much." Henry stood up and walked to where Valdris sat. "You want to know what I think? I think strength is admitting when you need help. I think courage is accepting kindness, even when your pride tells you not to. And I think your people are wrong about what makes someone worthy of respect." Valdris stared at him for a long moment. "You are very different from the scared child I met 20 years ago. You are very different from the powerful king who helped him. Am I better or worse?" Henry thought about it. Different, and maybe, in some ways, more real. That night, Valdris stood at the fountain and drank without help for the first time. His wings, though still weak, stretched out slightly. Faint flames flickered in his throat, warming the air around him. Henry watched from across the room and smiled. Progress. Slow, painful, hard-won progress. But progress nonetheless. Outside the palace, the sun set over Ashmar. The planet was still sick, still abandoned, still forgotten by most of the galaxy. But in one throne room, a dying king was learning to live again. And a human cargo hauler was proving that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness create the biggest changes. 1 month after Henry arrived on Ashmar, Valdris walked the entire length of the throne room without stopping. His steps were still careful, still measured, but they were steady. Henry watched from his camp corner, feeling something swell in his chest that might have been pride. "How do you feel?" Henry asked. Valdris stretched his wings. They extended nearly 15 feet on each side. Still not their full span, but far better than the limp, lifeless things they had been. Stronger. Not whole, but stronger. That is all we can ask for. The medical scans showed remarkable improvement. Valdris's lung function was up by 40%. His muscle mass was returning. The plague was still in his system, but it had stopped progressing. The doctors Henry had been consulting remotely were baffled. They had never seen a dragon recover from this stage of the illness. "It is not just the medicine," one doctor had told Henry over video call. "His will to live has returned. That matters more than we usually admit." Henry had not shared that conversation with Valdris. The dragon still struggled with accepting help, even after weeks of it. His pride ran deep. That afternoon, while Henry was repairing one of the broken fountains in the palace gardens, he heard the sound of wings. He looked up to see a ship descending toward the courtyard. It was not the usual supply shuttle. This one was sleek and expensive, bearing Dragon Clan markings. Henry walked back to the throne room and found Valdris already standing at the entrance, watching the ship land. 3 dragons emerged, all nobles judging by their elaborate scale patterns and jewelry. "Valdris," the lead dragon called out. Her voice was cold and formal. "We heard rumors of your recovery. We had to see for ourselves." "Lady Sereth." Valdris's voice was equally cold. "You are one of my former advisors. As I recall, you left carrying half my treasury. We preserved what we could before the collapse. For the good of the realm." Sereth approached, her eyes scanning Valdris from head to tail. "You look better than expected. Perhaps the reports were exaggerated. The reports were accurate. I was dying. Now I am recovering." Sereth's gaze shifted to Henry, who stood quietly to the side. "Thanks to a human." Her tone dripped with contempt. "How far you have fallen, accepting charity from such a weak species." Henry felt anger flash through him, but he kept his mouth shut. This was Valdris's conversation. "Henry saved my life," Valdris said simply. "When my own kind abandoned me, he came. He stayed. He cared for me. There is no shame in that. There is every shame in it." Another dragon stepped forward, younger than Sereth, but just as arrogant. "You were once the greatest king our people had known. Now you are a charity case, dependent on a creature that cannot even breathe fire." Henry clenched his fists, but said nothing. Valdris, however, drew himself up to his full height. Even weakened, he was impressive. "Get out." Sereth looked surprised. "We came to offer you a chance to restore your dignity. Come with us. We will care for you properly, as befits your station. You can leave this human and his pity behind." I said get out. Flames flickered in Valdris's throat, small but real. "You did not come when I was dying. You stole from me. You abandoned me. You have no right to stand in my palace and insult the one being in the entire galaxy who showed me true loyalty." "You are making a mistake," Sereth warned. "The mistake was trusting any of you in the first place." Valdris took a step forward. "I am revoking your titles, your lands, your positions. All of you are exiled from my kingdom. If you set foot on Ashmar again, I will consider it an act of war." The 3 dragons stared at him in shock. Then Sereth's expression twisted into something ugly. "You have no kingdom. You have an empty planet and a human servant. You are delusional. Perhaps. But this empty planet is mine, and I choose who stands on it. You are not welcome here." The dragons left, their ship lifting off with more force than necessary. Henry watched them go, then turned to Valdris. "You did not have to do that for me," Henry said quietly. "I did it for both of us." Valdris lowered himself to the ground, the confrontation having tired him out. "They wanted me to be ashamed of you. I refuse. You have shown me more honor than they ever did. They were your advisors, your people, and you're my friend. Valdris looked at Henry directly. That word means something different to humans than it does to my kind, I think. But I'm learning your definition, and I prefer it. The next day, another ship arrived. This one was human, a passenger transport rather than cargo. David climbed out, along with 3 other human haulers Henry knew from various stations. We brought building supplies, David announced, gesturing to the cargo hold. Figured if you're going to stay here long term, you might want to fix this place up properly. Henry stared at them. You came all the way here to help repair a palace? We came to help you, David corrected. The palace is just a bonus. Over the following week, the small group of humans worked to restore parts of the palace. They fixed broken windows, repaired the fountain systems, and cleared out debris from years of neglect. Valdris watched in amazement as these beings, so small compared to dragons, worked together with efficiency and good humor. Your species is very social, Valdris observed one evening. We survive by working together, Henry explained. One human alone is not very strong, but humans together can accomplish almost anything. That is a kind of strength I never understood before. David and the others stayed for 10 days before returning to their regular work. Before they left, David pulled Henry aside. The news networks are going crazy about this story, David said. Human helps dying Dragon King. Dragon King chooses human over his own people. It is spreading everywhere. You're changing how a lot of species see humans. Henry shook his head. I'm just repaying a debt. No, David du Sigrid. You're showing them who we are. And that matters more than you realize. After they left, Henry found Valdris standing in the restored gardens, looking at the fountains now flowing with clean water. Thank you, Valdris said without turning around. For what? For not giving up on me. For showing me that weakness and strength can exist together. For teaching me what true loyalty looks like. The dragon turned to face him. And for giving me a reason to keep living. Henry smiled. You gave me the same gift once. I am just returning it. 3 months after Henry first landed on Ashmar, Valdris flew for the first time since the plague had taken hold. It was not a long flight, just a circle around the palace courtyard, but it was flight. Henry watched from below, shielding his eyes from the sun, and felt tears he did not bother to hide. When Valdris landed, his legs were shaking from the effort, but his eyes were bright. I never thought I would feel the wind beneath my wings again, the dragon said, his voice thick with emotion. Told you, Henry replied, grinning. Human medicine and stubbornness can work miracles. Over the following weeks, word of Valdris's recovery spread across the galaxy. The Galactic Council sent observers to verify the reports. They arrived expecting to find a dying dragon clinging to false hope. Instead, they found a king walking his palace grounds with growing strength, attended by a small group of human helpers who had gradually joined Henry's effort. The lead observer, a diplomatic creature from a species called the Variant, spoke with both Valdris and Henry separately. This is unprecedented, she told Henry. A dragon recovering from this stage of the plague. It should not be possible. Humans specialize in doing impossible things, Henry replied. The observer studied him carefully. You stayed here for 3 months. You gave up your career, your contracts, possibly your reputation in some circles. Why? Henry pulled out the crystal scale he still carried. Because 20 years ago, a king showed kindness to a scared child. That kindness shaped who I became. When I had the chance to return it, there was no question about what I would do. Your species is unusual, the observer said. Most intelligent life prioritizes survival and advancement. Humans prioritize connection and reciprocity, even at personal cost. Is it a criticism? No, the observer said thoughtfully. An observation, and perhaps an explanation for why your species has become so influential despite your physical limitations. News networks across multiple systems picked up the story. The Dragon King who survived impossible odds. The human who refused to abandon him. The friendship that bridged species and challenged cultural assumptions. Public opinion started shifting. Dragons who had supported abandoning the sick began facing criticism from other species. why they left their king to die. What did it say about their values that a human showed more loyalty than his own children? Some dragon nobles doubled down, calling Valdris weak and Henry an opportunist. But others, younger dragons mostly, began questioning their culture's obsession with strength above all else. Valdris addressed this controversy in a public message broadcast across the Galactic Council networks. I was dying, he said, his voice clear and strong. My own species left me because I had become weak. A human named Henry came to help me because I had once shown him kindness. He taught me that strength without compassion is hollow, that power without loyalty is meaningless. My people say I have disgraced myself by accepting help from a lesser species. I say that any species that abandons their sick and dying has already disgraced itself. The message caused outrage among traditional dragons, but it resonated with many others. Within weeks, Valdris received communications from dragons across the galaxy, some angry, but many expressing support. Henry watched all of this from the sidelines, slightly uncomfortable with the attention. He had not come to Ashmar to make a political statement. He had come to help a friend. You started something, Valdris told him one evening as they sat in the restored gardens. I just stayed with someone who needed help. That is how all great changes begin, with one person refusing to accept how things are. Henry leaned back against a fountain edge. What happens now? You're getting stronger every day. Eventually, you will not need me here. Valdris was quiet for a moment. I've been thinking about that. This palace is too large for one dragon, even a king. And Ashmar, though scarred by plague, is still a beautiful world. I want to open it to settlement. Settlement by who? Humans, primarily. Your people who helped restore this palace. Others who might want to start fresh on a new world. I will offer them land, protection, and full citizenship in my kingdom. In exchange, they bring their knowledge, their medicine, their way of seeing the world. Henry sat up straight. You want to create a colony? A dragon-human world? I want to create something new. A kingdom where strength and compassion are equally valued. Where different species work together instead of conquering each other. Valdris looked at Henry, and I want you to help me build it. As my chief companion, my primary advisor, my friend, I'm just a cargo hauler. You are the being who saved my life and taught me what true leadership means. That makes you more qualified than any noble who ever served me. Henry thought about his life before Ashmar, hauling cargo from station to station, living alone in a small ship. No real connections, no real purpose beyond the next contract. Then he thought about these last 3 months. The hard work, the slow progress, the feeling of actually mattering to someone. Okay, he said finally, let's build something new. Over the next year, the transformation began. Human settlers arrived, drawn by the promise of land and the chance to be part of something unprecedented. They brought their skills, their families, their hope. Dragon scholars came too, younger ones interested in learning from humans rather than dismissing them. The palace became a center of genuine cooperation. Humans and dragons worked side by side, learning from each other, building a society that valued both strength and kindness. Valdris thrived in this new environment. He was not just surviving anymore. He was leading again, but in a different way, with wisdom earned through suffering and humility learned through need. Henry stood in the gardens one evening, watching human children play near the fountains. One small girl ran up to Valdris, fearless, and asked if she could touch his scales. The dragon lowered himself down and let her run her tiny hand across his face, laughing at the texture. IT reminded Henry of himself at that age, scared and lost, until a king stopped to help him, that he pulled out the crystal scale from his pocket. It had been 21 years since Valdris first gave it to him. 21 years since a small act of kindness had planted a seed that grew into friendship, into recovery, into a new kind of kingdom. Henry smiled and put the scale back in his pocket. He would keep carrying it, not as a reminder of debt repaid, but as proof that compassion, once shared, never truly ends. It just keeps growing, spreading, touching more lives than anyone could predict. The Dragon King had faced his end alone, but he had not died alone. Instead, He had discovered that sometimes falling is just the first step toward rising higher than you ever thought possible. And sometimes the smallest person carries the greatest gift.